This is Doug Stout. It's July 17th, 2014. I'm here with Frances Benner. Her maiden name was Frances Tritle. Frances, where were you born?
Springfield, Ohio.
Okay. And what was your birthday?
December 15th, 1920.
And you came to Licking County in 1962, you told me?
Yes.
Because of a man.
Right.
So that's when you came to Licking County. But we want to talk about your service. So in World War II, you enlisted?
Yes.
And when did you enlist?
It began in the middle of 1943 when the recruiter for the service for nurses in the service came to our school of nursing to recruit the seniors. And I mentioned that I was interested in being a flight nurse. And they said as soon as I completed my education to contact them. And that's exactly what happened. After you finished your nursing education, took your state boards and completed all the requirements, then you notified them and they sent you a date for reporting, which was in September of 1943. My uncle was a notary public and administered the oath of second lieutenant, and I received my orders to report to Patterson Field, which was down outside of Dayton, and I said I joined the Army to see the world, and I went 20 miles.
Where were you in school at nursing? Is that in Springfield?
In the City Hospital School of Nursing in Springfield.
And what made you want to go into the flight nurse corps?
Oh, I had an interesting experience in my younger years. My dad and older brother and I had an opportunity to go out to the airport in Springfield, where they provided rides, short rides to people on a new, I think it was a tri-motor airplane.
Uh-huh.
And we flew in, they took about 10 of us at a time, and we flew into the edge of Springfield and back. If you got there before 7 o'clock in the morning, you got to ride for 10 cents. And so we were there by 7 o'clock in the morning, and that kind of piqued my interest, and I was interested in flying from then on.
Did when the war happened, when you went into nursing, is that what you had planned on doing? I mean, is that I want to be a nurse because then I want to enlist in the war effort, or had you always wanted to be a nurse?
I always wanted to be a nurse.
So they sent you to Dayton to see the world, and then how long were you at Dayton?
We were there until December of '43, and then received orders. We had three close friends. Four of us were close friends, and we received orders to report to other stations. And my closest friend and I received orders to McClellan Air Force Base in Sacramento, California. And the other two of our four friends went to Hillfield in Ogden, Utah. So they put us on the train in Dayton, and we went to Chicago and got on a very crowded train filled with military people and set out for the West. And had a wonderful very crowded train trip, and arrived in California. We were there for several months, and during that time we had an opportunity to do some flying, and then we let our chief nurse know that we were interested in air evacuation, and she started the process that we received orders then in that would be in 1944 to go back to air evacuation school, which was at Bowman Field in Louisville. And so we and our friends at Hillfield were on the same plan, and they went back the same time we did.
Wow. At Dayton, did did you have to do physical training and basic training and that, just like?
No, in Dayton we didn't have to. We were instructed in everything that we needed to know to be a second lieutenant and received our uniforms and everything like that. But they had a small hospital there, and we were assigned duties to work at the hospital and all the basics.
Right.
We didn't actually go through that kind of training until we got to Aerovac, and we were with many nurses in that program down at Bowman Field, and we went through infiltration and bivouac and things like, and did a lot of marching and got became familiar with what it was to be on the plains, and of course that they were much different.
Right. I'm sure they were. Because when you're talking aerovac for World War II, you're talking a plane. You're not talking a helicopter.
No,
So,
no.
So I don't know how they did aerovacs, I guess, during World War II. So they would drive the wounded then to an airport, and then your job would then be to pick them up at the airport and then take them out to a hospital.
Actually, when we in the Aerovac school, and then from that we were sent to places in the United States, and our group was sent to Romulus Field in the Detroit area, and from there we were assigned to certain planes that were designated to go to whatever location, like the coastal areas, and pick up the sick and wounded, and according to where they were being sent, usually to a general hospital that would meet their needs. The one that I always remember was Battle Creek, Michigan. They had a amputee center, and this is the kind of thing we did, going back and forth in the country to do that. Now during that time, then we were awaiting orders to go overseas. And when I was gone on one trip, which was over the Thanksgiving holidays, my roommate, my close friend, received orders for both of us to go to the South Pacific, but I was out. I couldn't follow those orders, so she went to the South Pacific. And when I returned, then I was put on the list for to be sent to the CBI theater. And my other two friends, since there were four of us, we then were. This was late in '44, and we were given the opportunity to go home for Christmas and came back, and then started to our trip down to go to the CBI theater, which was in Miami Beach. And so we went by train down to the overseas replacement depot in North Carolina, I believe.
Uh-huh.
And then when we were there, one of the girls that was a member of our group of four had gotten married over the Thanksgiving holiday, and then she decided they decided to start their family, so she was released from the service, and our two remaining group of the original four, we went down to Florida then, and awaited the orders to actually send us to India, and so we went from there.
So how did they get you from there to India? Did they fly you, or did they put you on?
They did fly us.
So
Yeah.
how long did that take?
Well, we went across the Atlantic to Bermuda, and the Azores, to Casablanca, across North Africa. That's where we were when this picture was taken. And then we had a few days there to do this kind of thing, and then we went on to Karachi, and every place we went, we'd say, "Where's our station destination was a place called Chabua, India. We'd say, "What can you tell us about Chabua?" They said, "Never heard of it." You know, and even when we got in Karachi, in India, then they didn't know where Chabua was. They knew where we were going, but they really didn't know. But after we left Chabua, you stopped twice in your trip across India, and one was Gaya and one was Agra. And Agra is a place that you take off and land, and you can see the Taj Mahal
Wow.
when you're going there. Chabua was stationed in the foothills of the Himalaya Mountains, and it's about 400 and some miles due north of Calcutta. And it was a place that they had designated for trying to get supplies across the mountains into China. And there were a lot of things there. We were a medical air evacuation squadron, and there had been a group of nurses stationed there prior to we were the second group. And so we arrived there in 1945, early in the year, and were given as much instruction as they had about what we would be doing, which would be primarily taking the planes of sick and wounded back across India to Karachi on their journey starting toward home. And that was the main part of our flying.
How how did how were the planes set up? I mean, could the men or the patients that you had? I mean, were they just sitting in seats, or did they have beds? Or
We had, of course, the planes were the old DC-3s, which was the two-engine propeller engine, and the other one was DC. I hope I'm remembering this right. 4, which had 4 engines, and the planes were set up so that if the patients were able, they sat. And if they weren't able, we had a device that they could have litters, and they were placed on litters. We did not have, at least I didn't have the experience with a lot of litter patients. We had mostly patients who were ambulatory, and and you dealt with what you had. Of course, you had parachutes if you needed them, and we did make a couple of journeys over to China, and of course it was treacherous to fly the mountains. There was a lot of shipping by air going over the mountains, and the pilots didn't have any weather like they have now. Nothing to compare to now. They pretty much didn't know the weather until the fellow that just landed came and told him what his experience had been. And, they were taking a lot of risk, and of course they lost a lot of pilots. And many of them had to jump out of their planes and everything else. And many of them had a much more dangerous experience than we did.
I was gonna say, did you have any experience that's with the weather and that really sticks in your mind? Or
Well, no, I'll tell you just one thing. That a young soldier, we were flying actually back to Karachi, and the weather, and the pilot had said the weather was going to be rough, and the wings on that plane expand. They went out pretty far, and he called me. He said, "Lieutenant," he said, "I can see those wings shaking out there, and I think they're going to fall off." And I said, "How about you taking one of these little pills for me?" And he said, he said, "Oh no, don't put me to sleep. If I'm gonna die, I want to know it." But he took the pill for me, and so when it was time to land, I went to wake him up. He said, "You put me to sleep."
It's for his own good.
That's the only thing I remember there. One of the most interesting experiences I think that I had was after the war. One thing is we were away from communications. I was fortunate to have a brother who was in the Army and was stationed at the Army Post Office in New York. As I said, I had a private in the best place in the world, and he would put a newspaper, one of the New York newspapers, in the pouch. Army official documentation. And so when the men would hand out the mail over there, they'd say, "How is it that you get this?" And I said, "Because I know somebody in the right place." And that was the only way we got the news.
Right.
It was the only way we got the
I
news.
bet you were popular for a paper.
Yes, I was.
Were they just American soldiers that you were bringing back, or were they?
No, mostly
Allied troops?
no, just Americans. And but when we got the word that the war was over, then Burma opened up. It had not been opened up, you see, during the war, but it opened up, and we would fly down into Burma, and the minute we would land, and by the time the men would get the doors open on the plane, bingo, there were all these Burmese people under the wing. And Burmese people have a nice round face, and they always kind of look happy. Of course, they were happy to see us, and they always were smiling, and they were so glad to see the American people. And in those flights, we brought men out of Rangoon and some of the places in Burma that they've been held that were awful, just awful. And they were in such sad physical shape. And they said they thought non-fat dry milk was just great, you know.
Right.
That was really gratifying to be able to help those people, and that was a nice experience. And we hadn't been there too long when my roommate and I were assigned to Calcutta, and we went down there and flew from Calcutta up to Karachi because there were a number of troops down in that
And how were the India people? The Indians, did they treat you?
area. Well, now up in Chabua, where we were stationed, and we had a lot of contact with the natives because the young men there served to take care of us. We lived in tents and didn't know a lot about things, and they would come and clean our tents and get things for us, get laundry done, and teach us a lot about their people. And we were in the tea country, and they had been under the influence of the British people for some time, and were very nice, very helpful. And in the cities like Calcutta, where it was so crowded, it was you were aware of the fact that you were in a foreign area, and you had to pretty much adapt to the things that they had going on in their lives. I can't think of any negative kinds of things. I'm sure there were some.
Sure.
And most of it was our adaptation to what their way of life was.
So when you wanted to see the world, was that an okay part of the world to see?
It was a very interesting part. It was an excellent opportunity to see the differences. It was I'm really grateful for the fact that I had the opportunity.
Are there any soldiers that you transported other than that one that stick out to you? Or okay, are there any soldier stories that you remember? Any certain soldiers that stick out in your mind that you had to transport?
No, no, no. Many, a couple of the. I'm trying to think of the actual situation some of the other nurses had, and I'm. It's difficult to say about my accuracy of my memory.
Seems pretty good to me.
uh, I really think she had someone that was involved in a device like an iron lung. I'm not sure, but it was something like that. And she was one of the first ones that got to come home because we had toward the end of our time there, we had a couple of gals get married because they had the opportunity to make all the necessary preparations with the authorities. Um, and so it took them a long time. The husband was a pilot in China, and she was with our unit, and I think she got the first chance to to come home because of that. And I think she may have come with that patient. I think she flew to China and got that patient, and they went around the other way. But I can't think of anything else outstanding, and I can't think of anybody who reported they had any problems as far as accidents or anything on the aircraft.
How long was one of your flights, say, from there to like Calcutta? How long were you in the air that you were actually with the patients?
I can't tell. I can't
Okay.
remember that.
I just
I
didn't know
can't.
if it was hours or.
No, it wasn't. I know we had. We had places where we had to stay. Well, of course, we had to stay overnight. Once we got to Karachi, we had to stay and go back. But I can't remember across India that we had to stay or that we had to because of the weather or anything.
Mm-hmm.
We did go to China, but we always then we didn't go too often, and we either came down to Calcutta or came back to Chapel. We went down to Calcutta some with it, but I can't remember that. Although I know I had patients, and I get that mixed up with the ones I did in this country.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't say.
Just too many patients.
Well, it's too long ago.
So when did you get to come home?
Um, we got to come home after Thanksgiving in 1945, and we had a leave area in Kashmir that, of course, we had tropical climate where we were, and that was really something. And so they let the people that were assigned there go to Kashmir for leave as a kind of a benefit, a balance. And so they said that if the Kashmir would be closed down for the season, and I think I don't know where Thanksgiving fits in there, but I know my friend and I went on the last flight to Kashmir, and I can't remember what the question wasn't now.
It was just coming home.
Coming home, okay. That we were in Kashmir, and we got up there. We flew up there. They provided flights from the base. We got on the last flight, and then on our way home, from back to our base from there, we had to find our own way, and we had to come by bus down to someplace up there, and then finally get a train down to New Delhi. And when we got down to New Delhi, we could get to the airport, Air Force base,
Right.
and get a flight back to Kashmir, back to Karachi, not Chabwa.
Okay.
And my friend had developed a very bad cold, and when we got back to our base at Chabwa, she had to go in the hospital, and she had pneumonia. The orders came for us. It was time for us to go home. So the only reason I say this is because it marked it my memory then. I had to leave without her, and that upset me because we had been through all these things together.
Sure.
And when I came home, I came the very same way we went over, except we didn't go into Florida. We went into New Jersey. And when she came home, she was able to come home. A couple weeks later, they went across and were able to go into Rome, and I was so glad for her. It worked out for her,
Right.
because she's a devout Catholic, and it gave her a chance to go to the Vatican. So that's what I remember about coming home.
That's neat. So then, when you came home, how much longer were you in the service?
I was only in the active duty. That was it for active duty, and I went into the reserves, and I was in the reserves for quite a long time.
And then did you go back to Springfield
Oh yes, yes, I went back to Springfield.
and work there in a hospital?
Yes, I did. Mm-hmm.
And then the Korean War started.
Yes, and that started right, and I had been in the reserves, and I transferred to the reserves in the Army, but I wasn't put on active reserves until about 1950, and I was working for the state, and I was working down the Cincinnati area, and I was joined to a unit down there, and so then I hadn't been in the active reserves very long until they indicated we would be called up for active duty, and then I got my orders early 1951 to go to Fitzsimmons Army Hospital in Denver, and I went on active duty there February the 1st, and was there for several months, and then I transferred to at the hospital, and we got a lot of the amputee boys that were coming back from Korea, and then I went to the hospital procedures training area at Fort Sam Houston in Texas, and I was there for a year, and that was my active duty. And then I was released from that in the summer of '52, and then I stayed on the reserves for a couple more years, and then I resigned my commission because I was going to school, and I tried to, but I couldn't keep up all the requirements for the reserves.
Were you just going for more nursing classes for school, or?
Well, I was. I had already. That's one of the benefits I had, of course, was the GI Bill, and I went to Boston University School of Nursing, took an advanced course in orthopedic nursing in 1948 when that split took. That's what I was doing then. And then when I resigned my commission, I was going to graduate school at the University of Minnesota in public health.
Okay. What when you resigned your commission, what were you at that point?
When I didn't know it I knew I was a first lieutenant because we were promoted when we were overseas.
Okay.
And then I didn't know until I got a communication from. I had made captain.
Nobody told you.
I didn't know it, but that's.
So you were a captain when
That was the captain. I
when you
was
got
a captain.
Okay. So you're in Minnesota and you're going to school there,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm interested now how you met a farmer from Lincoln County.
Well, after I came back to Ohio from the schooling in public health, then I had worked in various positions in public health, and I started out in Greene County, and then I took a position with Ohio State in their then school of nursing and taught public health.
Okay.
And I was doing that. We had the students from the campus in Columbus would come to Dayton to the public health nursing service and have a quarters experience.
Okay.
And we have various instructors in other parts of the state, and I was the one in Dayton. And it was then that we had some mutual friends that introduced Mr. Banner and me. And so we got to know each other and decided we'd make our association permanent. So we were married in Dayton, and then I had a quarter to finish. So then when I came here, then I first started with the Newark City Health Department. Then I had worked with the state program for handicapped children when I was down in Dayton or in Cincinnati. And so I went back with them and worked on the state level with them. And then one of the nurses from the county health department here contacted me, and I became the health commissioner for Licking County General Health District. And that's where I completed my public health experience. I had a very enjoyable time.
What year did you complete? What year did you stop doing that?
1981.
Did you know Margaret Chaconis?
Oh, yes, I know.
Yeah.
I worked with her.
I figured you did. She was my neighbor growing up. Her and George, yeah.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
I think of her often. Yes.
I think she signed every birth certificate for about 1 million of us here.
Yeah, right. She did. Yes, she was. Yes, I came from Ohio State, and the Warden Hotel was downtown, and Dr. Greenlee was the health commissioner. I think maybe that's before your time.
Yeah.
Anyhow, the Warden Hotel, and that's where the office for the health department was, and that was a very interesting experience. And I really had wonderful experiences in public health, and I owe it to a nurse from the Northwest Coast at the program I attended in Boston in orthopedic nursing. She was from their state program for handicapped children in Oregon or Washington. And she said, and I really enjoyed that and got a lot out of the orthopedic program. And she said, you don't want to work in the hospital, because if you really want to see people with orthopedic problems, you need to go into public health and be out where you can see them. And so I thought I knew what it was like. That's what I'd done in the hospital. People with broken hips, and the doctors were coming home from the service and trying new things. And my interest was a little bit more toward pediatrics than it was in older people at that time. So I wrote back to Ohio Department of Public Health and said, I think I'm going to go into public health. With maybe the state program for handicapped children, what can I do? And they said, you start with a year's experience in public health. And so from that time on, I stayed with public health, and I really enjoyed it.
You really knew what you wanted to do, it sounds like. I mean, from a young age, I mean, what you wanted to do, and you had a goal that you really picked out. Now, what's Mr. Benner's first name?
His first name is Alfred, but he goes by Franklin.
Okay. And then where did you settle? Where was the farm here in Licking County? Where do you live?
It's in Marianne Township.
Okay.
Mhm.
Does he still farm it?
Well, he does the best he can, but he can. We're both in the same general age area, but he's worked very hard all his life. He had cattle. They had milk cows, and then he was just getting out of that business when we got married. And then he's had beef cattle and hogs, and he's been there all his life. He was born there.
Really?
Yes,
That's neat.
yeah.
Very neat.
Mhm.
Well, I appreciate. Is there anything else you want to share about your experiences?
Oh, I think I've talked enough.
Well, no, you can never talk enough for me, but I don't want to cut you off.
No, no. I
Okay.
think I really feel I've been richly blessed, and now I'm benefiting from all these wonderful people in our church that do so much for to help us out.
Well, I appreciate your service,
Well, thank you.
and I appreciate you coming in and talking.
Well, I really feel, you just feel like you really have been led, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful experience. One that I would never have had in any other kind of situation. So my brother had a wonderful experience in the Army Post Office too. He had worked at the post office in Springfield when he went in, and then was sent to Fort Lee, and somehow got involved in the post office unit there, and found himself in this unit in the center of New York City, and they were a small unit with a commanding officer, and one of the times when I was flying in the states here, I got it. I went into Mitchell Field or whatever it was, and called him, and he told me how to get down to Manhattan, and we met for the day, and I got to see him, and he got a big charge. He was a private, and I was second, So it was very beneficial.
That's neat. Well, like I say, I appreciate you coming in and talking to us.
Welcome. You're welcome. I hope